When I was young, and before I'd seen anything wonderful that swept me away in the theater, I knew I wanted to be an artist from like my beloved Uncle Frank, like my father wanted to be, like my grandpa. I knew I wanted to be an artist, and everybody in my family fed that desire. My first paint sets, my easel when I was 5 years old, all of it was just given to me, and it was just assumed I was going to grow up to be an artist. As I got older, it began to narrow down somewhat. And I went in New York to a school which is now the school at Lincoln Center, which is called the Fiorello H. LaGuardia High School of the Arts. In my time, it was two separate schools. There was the High School of Performing Arts, which was dancers and theater people, and then there was the High School of Music and Art, and our school, Music and Art, was located up at Upper Manhattan, up near City College. I went there not really knowing precisely what I wanted to become. Fashion illustrator, maybe, graphic designer, whatever that meant to me at the age of 14. But about my freshman year in high school, I went to see House of Flowers on Broadway with a friend of mine, high school buddy of mine. A wonderful show with Pearl Bailey and a wonderful score, and based on a story by what's his name in Cold Blood? Truman Capote. And House of Flowers, and it was gorgeous, designed by Cecil Beaton or Oliver Messel, one or the other. Is just beautiful. And I remember going home, and always at my mother's kitchen table, there's, what did you do today? What were your impressions? And I said, oh, Mom, I've got to go into the theater. I'm going to become an actor. She said, what do you mean you're going to become an actor? You've been wanting to be an artist for so long. Oh, yes, but the stage is so wonderful. 13, 14 years old, what did I know? And my mother, in all of her wisdom, said, well, you could still be an artist for the stage. You could be a designer. Did you think about that on the train ride home? No, dummy me. And that did it. I mean, from that point on, I wish I could pinpoint the date. I have the program somewhere, and I could pinpoint the date because I know I wrote the date on the program. From that point on, all I wanted to do was design. And there at the High School of Music and Art, although we had to take sculpture classes and pottery classes and painting classes, and there was no official scenic design class, but there was the opportunity to now and then design scenery for one of the opera productions that the vocal department was doing. And in my senior year, there was going to be a presentation by the vocal department of music and art of La Finta Giardiniera, which is an early opera of Mozart. And I don't think I designed it, but I worked painting it. And I was surrounded by this Mozart music. My parents always listened to the Met broadcasts, but I didn't really pay much attention. I did own a copy of La Boheme, in high school. I owned the Saint of Bleecker Street. And I think that was it for vocal music. Otherwise, it was Broadway shows. But being surrounded by these, my fellow students with this Mozart music really was a turn on. And by the time I went to Boston University, I knew I wanted to be an opera designer. And strangely, La Finta Giardiniera was the first opera in college that I worked on because Sarah Caldwell, who was part of Boston University, the music department was an adjunct of our theater department. We all performed in the same theater, we all worked together. That was the very first opera I did there, and having Horace Armistead as my teacher, who was so gung-ho on the classical stage, I knew then that what I wanted to do was opera. And that was as a freshman. Little did I know, at the end of my senior year, the following year, I would meet Bliss, who was already an opera director. Seemed the right fit. But that's the way it evolved. And I had met Gordon McCunis, his pal from the Army. I met him in my junior year because he had come to Boston as the assistant to the designer who was doing a Sarah Caldwell production, and he needed painters. So I applied, and Gordon hired me as one of the 2 painters for a production of La Bohème that he was assisting on. Gordon at that time was in Yale. He'd finished up in the Army with Bliss. And I began hearing stories in my junior year in college about his friend Bliss Hebert, for whom he was now working in Washington, D.C., at the same time as he was the assistant to the designer Robert Fletcher, who was a big and famous designer in New York. All kind of little connections.